And I think what we need to do then is to open up the possibilities. It's more than just either or. There are a lot of things between a job you hate and being homeless.
You're listening to the Redefining Wealth Podcast, where we chase purpose, not money. I'm your host, Patrice Washington, and I am so excited to welcome you back for another stellar episode. Today, I sit down with Toya Gavin. We talk about how a dream job to the outside world actually led her down a path of burnout and then depression. Her inside world was in turmoil, and I know that that happens to so many of us who consider ourselves to be purpose chasers. I love this conversation because Toya and I talk about why we get into this habit of making decisions from either or. You know what I'm talking about. The truth is some things should have an and we're going to get into that today. Now, before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. And if you're a purpose chaser who's been rocking with me for some time, then make sure you rate and review the podcast. Even if you did it a long time ago, I know there's something new in your spirit that you want to share, and it really, really does help. Now, let's get into our affirmation of the week.
You know, you got to speak positivity into your life, into your day. You gotta affirm positivity. You gotta affirm abundance. You gotta affirm yourself to wealth.
This week's affirmation is, I am exactly where I belong in this moment. Every experience I've encountered has led me to this moment, and I am grateful for what this current space and place has come to teach me about life, about others, and most importantly, about myself. No experience, relationship, or position in my life was a waste, but rather an opportunity for purpose to continue to unfold before my eyes. No matter how uncomfortable or how unproductive things may feel today, I choose to see them as simply preparation for my tomorrow. So with that being said, I declare I am exactly where I belong in this moment. Welcome to the Redefining Wealth Podcast, Toya.
Hi, Patrice.
Hey.
Hey.
I am looking forward to this conversation, and I understand that we know some folks in common. So I have to just start out by giving a shout out to Natalie McNeil, who is a friend of this podcast. I think her episode was Your Life is Speaking to You. So definitely check that out. She is dope. And also to one of my P2P alum. And also she was in Mastery and Momentum. Shout out to Tawana. She's also my birthday twin. I don't know.
Oh,
if you
really?
know that.
No, I didn't know.
we are also birthday twins. So I have to thank her for actually connecting us. I was really, moved when I read a little bit about your story. So your background was as a practicing lawyer, right?
That's
so Toya, you had made it as far as,
as far as people know. Right.
Society was concerned, you had made it.
Right.
Life had some other things for you. So tell us a little bit about your journey to who we know you as today.
So, yes. Hi, everybody. So I started off in school. I was always very smart in multiple subjects and all that, but I always wanted to go to law school. And I think a lot of people go with the intention of helping people, of furthering justice, all of those things. And when you get into the actual career, so there's the theory of the law and what you think it's going to be, and then there's the career of the law. And the career of the law, there's a lot of issues there. There are a lot of issues. There's pressure. There is the workload. You think you're going to be like in court slaying it all the time. A lot of the work is quite tedious. The hours. They talk about lawyers making so much money, and there is money to be made in the field, but for Black women and for women in general, we don't make as much as people promote. So I think the last time I looked up the statistic, I'm from New Jersey originally, like the median salary for a Black lawyer was like $60,000, right?
What?
Yes. And you'd be surprised because I know.
Okay, y'all have to see my face. Let me just stop right there. I have had clients who are attorneys, who talk about multiple six figures of debt to become an attorney.
Absolutely.
So you can't tell me that there are attorneys out there anywhere like that are not earning six figures. That doesn't even register. That's not what is promoted.
That's not what's promoted because, the law field in and of itself, unfortunately, is very pedigree oriented. And so there's a lot of talk, even in law school, about being the top 10%, the top 10% of your class. What law school did you go to? There's a lot of conversation about rankings. Where does your law school rank? Like if you're a doctor, you're a doctor. No one asks you, is your ranking, is your school number 10 or number 20? They're like, can you help me? Thank you, right? In the law field, you can't even get into certain firms if you didn't go to the right school, right? And so with that, if they're talking about the top 10% of the class, that leaves the other 90%, which is the majority of the people, right? The other 90% of the class, what's happening with y'all, right? And so there's all this shame around that, and no one is talking about that. And then when you think about the justice aspect, which is why I went to law school as a Black woman, I think a lot of people of color, immigrants, a lot of marginalized people go with the help of creating and helping and promoting justice. And what you realize is you find yourself having to choose between, okay, do I take this position where I can be of service and help, but I can't really eat because I have this debt, right? Do I take this position? How much do I give of myself? Or do I go to this firm where I'm making all this money, but my clients, they're not the best. They're not my purposeful clients. They're not the people who feed my soul. I think a lot of lawyers find themselves in that place. And I was there. And so I was a prosecutor for a number of years and loved the work, loved doing justice. But I was like, okay, a lot of it was heavy. I did a lot of stuff in the domestic violence field, a lot of assault. It was very, very heavy. And I just wanted to do something where I could help people who were on the upswing of life, who were like joyous and all that. So I started a practice doing small business law. I loved it, and thought like, this is it. And then all of a sudden, because I took that same work ethic that had carried me through my whole life into this business, I burned out. And my brain and my body were like, no. So we're on strike. And I could laugh about it now, but it was not a good time.
Well, Toya, and from what I read, it wasn't like, oh, I burned out and I needed a quick vacation. You're talking about 18 months.
Yeah.
What does experiencing burnout and I believe also major depression feel like when you also felt like I'm in purpose, like I'm doing what I feel purpose to do right now? How is this possible that I also feel this?
It's it's one of the things that happens to you when you are depressed and burnout is that your executive functioning, so your ability to make decisions, to understand what's going on, it's off. So you're very confused. So in that space, I felt very confused. I was like, if I love this, like what's happening to me? And I think, as a lot of people do, I had never gotten therapy before then, really. So I think I had suffered with bouts of depression prior to that, but just didn't know that's what I was going through, right? Because I'm used to just pushing through, right? Like, I'll figure this out, just keep going, just keep going. And so I just was like, why can't I push through this? And when you're in that space, the thoughts, it's like your thoughts are attacking you. And so you can't believe them almost, because you're just thinking like, I should be able to figure this out. I should be able to do that. I love this. Why am I not getting out of bed? Why am I not doing what I said I was going to do? You know, all of those thoughts start to creep in, and it's a really, really tough place. I often say it's like living your life underwater, right? So like, if you were, think about how much effort it takes just to walk underwater. When you're depressed, everything feels like that. It feels like, okay, so getting out of bed means I got to walk across this Olympic-sized pool. So let me try to do this. And that's why you're tired. You're like, that's all I could do today. That's it.
Yeah, I remember talking to a girlfriend who experiences depression from time to time. And she says, sometimes, friend, just taking a shower is the win.
Mm-hmm.
That is the win.
Yeah.
Like the fact that I got up, recognized that I hadn't showered in days, and that I got in the shower and I now smell better is literally the win for the day. That's and you got to be okay with that.
Right. And then there's the spiraling thoughts of, because to the outside world, it looks like you're being lazy, or you would judge it as being lazy. Like, why, if you went out for the day and, you know, someone in your house, your kid or something, all they did was shower all day, you're like, get up and clean this house or whatever, right? But it's not like that. It's literally a battle with yourself. So there's so much work going on internally that all of your energy is focused there. So externally, what you're able to do is very, very limited.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And like you said, to the outside world, it may look like you're being lazy, but also to the outside world, people do people know how to even respond or support? Like, do they even know what to say, especially when they think you should be grateful? Mm-hmm. You are an attorney. Mm-hmm. You have this prominent position. What do you mean? Fill in the blank, right? Like, right. Even that. And I think sometimes from well-meaning friends and family members that think they're like reminding you to be grateful. And it's like, this right. is not a conversation about gratitude, right?
Right. I think even for myself, even though I was going through this in the sort of early stages of it, I didn't even recognize it for what it was. What happened is that one of my best friends who I talk with often, at the time, she was working at an organization that dealt with disabilities and depression, all these issues, and they had just had a training, right? And I've been talking to her regularly, but I was literally like getting up early every day just to give myself time to cry for about an hour, and then trying to, like, I was just managing around it, right? And so one day I couldn't stop, and I called her, and she was like, so I think this is what's happening for you, and I'm going to come and help you, and we're going to like work through this. But had it not been for her, I'm not sure when I would have realized it. And I think you're right in that people don't know the signs, don't know, what to say. But as our culture becomes more accustomed to these ideas of mental health, of self-care, I think we are recognizing like there are probably times in all of our lives where we have experienced some form of depression and anxiety as adults, and we just push through it, not realizing that, oh, we could have had help and support in those areas of our lives. And so I think that conversation is changing, but it's still a tough one.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I know that you're an attorney, but, earlier you mentioned, this idea of, do I take a position of purpose or do I eat? Right. Like, mm-hmm. just kind of, I just want to backtrack for a second, because yes, as an attorney, that's a very stressful, career path. But we see this in every career path, right? Mm-hmm. Like no matter who you are and what you do, again, even if you feel like, man, I am doing something that absolutely lights me up, I am in purpose, I know that this is the thing I've been called to do, all the things, you still have to be aware that burnout is a possibility. And one of
Mhm.
my clients, Dr. PBJ,
I
also
just
talks
heard her
about,
episode. Yeah.
yes,
Yes, it was
yes.
fantastic.
Dr. PBJ talks about compassion fatigue
Mhm.
and how even for people, who are just doing work, like you said, I just want to help. I want to
Mhm.
help the people. I want to make sure
Mhm.
that folks are taken care of. And and then that can go so far and get so deep that you maybe helping them is not helping you at the
Right.
same time. When you look back over your journey, do you know of when it switched? Like when you went from like, oh, I'm in my flow, I'm doing my thing, I love small business, law, to getting to this place of where I have burnt out. I've done too much. What was happening?
You know, I think back on the year when things were going on, it was like I was very early on in my business. And it was probably like it was the first year. And a lot of things were going well. Like I had replaced my salary in 4 months. I was like, oh, this is great. But also there were a lot of personal things that I was ignoring. Right. So I had my grandfather died. Just identity, somebody stole my identity. I had a car accident, like it was all of these things. My relationship at the time was a very toxic place. And how I felt about myself, like if I think about how I actually felt about myself at the time, um, I wasn't present to my worth, right? My worth was tied up in egoic things, in what I could accomplish, what I could do for people. And if I sat down for too long and really thought about how I felt about myself, I would have had a problem, right? And so I think when I started my practice, I was able to stop focusing on those cases where I felt like their need was greater than mine, right? Because they were in a rougher place, but that's not where I was. And so I couldn't hide in, the issues of other people. My issues were like, we've been here. I've been talking to you.
Yeah,
I've
but you
been
know
talking
what?
to you.
I think that sometimes that is rooted in how we're brought up, because I
Mm-hmm.
remember being told, well, you don't have it as bad as so and so. And
Mm-hmm.
so, because I wasn't being physically abused, I didn't realize that what I was experiencing was verbal and emotional abuse,
Yep.
right? Because I love my abusers,
Mm-hmm.
family.
Right.
So, because I wasn't getting marks on my back like Penny on Good Times, I was
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I should be grateful. I should be
Right.
grateful. And that just teaches you to sweep things under the rug, sweep it under the rug. And yet life is happening, and
Right.
life just keeps being life, and it keeps like compounding things.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. Somewhere along the line culturally, I think we've conflated like gratitude with less trauma. And like those are or a different type of trauma. And those are not the same thing. Right. And so just because you're not being like, I should be grateful that I'm not getting beat. Yes, and not and I shouldn't be emotionally abused either. I should, have the fullness, be able to express the fullness of myself in this society too, right?
Well,
But somewhere along those lines, those things get conflated.
well, that's also the
Mhm.
reason that people stay in careers and jobs they hate forever,
Absolutely.
because it's like, well, I should be grateful I have a job. Okay, but you also deserve to be fulfilled.
Right.
Like, you also, should be able to do work that you actually love with
Right.
people that you like, right? And not be in these workspaces that are not created to take care of you or care
Mm-hmm.
about you, right? Like, you also deserve to be in a healthy place, even in your work environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, you know, just to update the listener, so I'm no longer running the practice. I've transitioned into a coaching business, and we can talk more about that. But that's one of the things that I discuss mainly with my clients. I meet so many lawyers, so many women of color who are in that place. They are not fulfilled. They keep going to work every day because the trappings of the ego are definitely there. Maybe they're making the salary or they're taking care of whoever and all that, but they hate it. And it feels you feel very stuck because you're like, okay, well, how am I going to figure out? It's an either or proposition. And I think what we need to do then is to open up the possibilities. It's more than just either or. There are a lot of things between a job you hate and being homeless, right? Which is where most people go in their mind, right? It's like, if I don't keep this job, where's my son gonna go? We're gonna lose a house. I'm not gonna be able to, I'm not gonna have any food. I was like, there are so many options between there and there.
Yeah.
Let's kind of have a little bit of a different mindset around it.
Yeah. It's so funny that you mentioned that, because in my business, we talk about writing the worst case scenario, because I'm like, sometimes you need to write out all this doom and gloom you have predicted for your circumstances and read it back to yourself and ask yourself how likely that is.
Right.
So I've had clients do that. And it's like, if I don't keep this, I'm going to be homeless. So you don't have no family or friends. Like, you don't, so
right.
no, look, and I've been the person who slept on my brother's couch. Okay.
Right.
So you're talking to somebody who had to, move in with someone else, with my child, and for 3 months at the time. It's like, let's talk about possibility in between all of this. We're going to talk more about how your journey has evolved right after this break.
Okay.
When I started podcasting, I had nothing. No fancy equipment, no cover art, no theme music. I just had this burning desire that I was supposed to use my purpose of helping people redefine wealth in the podcasting space. And so with some intentional planning, I launched what became the Redefining Wealth Podcast in just 3 weeks. That was 4 years ago. And today, the Redefining Wealth Podcast has over 9 million downloads. We've interviewed everyone from celebrities to entertainers to authors and thought leaders. We've been featured everywhere from Success Magazine to Cosmopolitan and even Good Morning America. Now, why do I share all that? Because I'm not special. The truth is, this started with leaning into my purpose and being willing to use my voice in a powerful way. And I bet that there's something that's calling you as well, something that you need to use your voice to amplify in the marketplace. So I want to help you do that. If you're finally ready to use your voice and launch a podcast that aligns with your purpose, I want to invite you to check out my intentional online training, Podcast with Purpose. You can find out more details at podcastwithpatrice.com. That's podcastwithpatrice.com. Your purpose deserves to be amplified, and I want to help you do that. Oftentimes there is so much possibility between our choices, right? Between the options that we have. But for some reason, we do have a tendency to lean into these worst case scenarios. Now, I don't know about you, but I know early in my career, when I was working at a nonprofit in the financial education space, many of you know my story, right? I went from losing everything in the recession, going from a 7-figure business to literally scraping up change. And a part of my rebounds or rebuilding came when I got, for me, the offer of a lifetime, which was to work as a financial management consultant in a local nonprofit here in Atlanta. And so it was definitely a dream because it was fulfilling what I wanted to do, which was help people with personal finance. The problem was, as time went on, I realized just how overworked and burnt out I was. The struggle to meet the demands of counseling so many people one-on-one and driving all over greater Atlanta. And if you're from Atlanta, you know what I'm saying, right? From Lawrenceville to Marietta, to all over South Fulton and all of the different counties, I was overworked and overwhelmed. And so although I loved the people I was serving and I really loved speaking and the counseling and doing the work, I was breaking down. I think physically and mentally. And at the time, I was so overworked that spiritually, I'm sure I wasn't in a great place. But I kept thinking, well, if you leave, the only next step is homelessness, right? Because that's what we do. We go straight to like the worst case scenario. And on top of that, I was in this space where I just kept thinking, well, I should be grateful. I should be grateful. 2 years ago, I was on welfare. 2 years ago, I was getting food stamps. Like I was coming home to eviction notices. So now that I'm here, even though I know my talent and my gifting and my calling is well beyond this particular place, I should be grateful. And because I stayed in that place, not for long, but I was there of I should be grateful, I tolerated a lot of bad behavior. I tolerated not being treated the way that I know I should have been treated. Now, everyone was not bad. And so for those of you who worked with me back in the day, if you're actually still listening to the podcast, then you know I'm not talking about you. But there were some bad apples, right? And it made being in that space very difficult. And so I had to do this exercise that I consider now to be like right out the worst thing that could happen, because I had all of these thoughts and ideas swirling around my mind about what would happen if I left that job. What would happen if I would finally speak up? What would happen if I took a stand? And so in my mind, I always saw the worst case scenario and the worst possible thing. But when I finally wrote it down, what if I didn't get another job like immediately after leaving that job? Would things be strange? Yes, they would. Would my husband support me? Yes, he would. If it really got bad, could I go back and live on my brother's couch? Didn't want to, but I could definitely do it. Would I have to maybe get food stamps again? Yeah, didn't want to, but it was an option. And so when I started to write those things out, I realized really how unlikely a lot of it was. And even if I had to go to some of those extremes, I had lived through it before. So while it wasn't ideal, it wasn't the worst possible thing that could happen because I had survived it before. And writing out the worst case scenario, or what's the worst that could happen, really helped me take control of my thoughts so that I could address each one of those things and have a real answer for it. I call it naming the noise, right? And when I look back, I'm so grateful that I didn't settle for either or. I'm so grateful that I found the and. And the and was that I could still do work in the personal finance space. And I could still use my gift of speaking. And I could still use my heart for wanting to help people. And I could be well compensated. And I could work with a team that I adore, which I do now. And I could work from home and not be in traffic all over Atlanta every single day. And I could get to pick my daughter up from school on time. And I could make it to all of her activities without having to ask someone else if it was okay. Deciding to add the and changed my life. And I hope that if you're listening, you make a decision to name the noise, write out the worst case scenario, and choose and stop living in the land of either or. So, Toya, before the break, we were talking about the possibilities in between, right? And what you are now teaching women. So a lot of the women who come to you, if they're attorneys, they may be attorneys or just high earning women, right? Who feel trapped by the trappings of what success is supposed to look like. Tell us more about the types of folks you work with.
Yeah, so I help primarily women of color find better jobs, right? And that better job might be, in the same area where you're working, just like maybe at a new firm or a new company. It might be for lawyers, they change practice areas. It might mean that. It might mean doing something completely different, right? because a lot of times I talk to women and you call, like, because you have the challenge, the calling. They've been hearing that call and they've been ignoring it for so long. And it's really about creating a container to say, like, we can figure this out, right? We can figure out how you can change your career in a way that feels safe and affirming and really purposeful for you. And that's what I've been doing for the past like 2.5 years. And even that transition for me was an interesting transition.
Okay, tell us about it.
Well, being a lawyer full time, what I didn't realize is it's not just a career, it becomes a part of your identity. So it's that trapping of the ego. There's something to feeling like I'm introducing myself as a lawyer, right?
Oh,
People,
yes.
yeah, you know what I mean? And so when you then say to other lawyers, I'm a coach, there's a lot of stories that I can create about how they're going to receive it. And just because lawyers, we tend to be very skeptical people in general, risk averse people in general, people would say things to me like, how are you going to make money on that? That sounds great. Why would you do that? Like all those things, right?
Yeah.
And in our culture, even though the concept of coaching is becoming more popular and people understand it, there's still a lot of kind of like a stigma around coaching, particularly if you watch a sitcom and the person's a life coach, he or she is usually the joke. And it's like, they don't understand that this is a profession. It is a skill that we do so much work and so much study. I have never studied, worked, learned, integrated more in my entire life. Mm-hmm. And that's coming from somebody with a law degree.
Right. Right. I totally connect to what you're saying too. The audience knows I've been saying this for years. My dad was like, what are you doing? It would have felt better for my dad to be able to explain to his friends that I was an accountant, because he could wrap his mind around that. So sometimes, I would even meet people out and about and they go, oh, you're Henry's daughter. Like, oh yeah, you're the one that went to USC. Yeah, you're an accountant. I'm like, no, I don't know why you think I'm an accountant. And I would say, oh no, I'm an author, I'm a professional speaker, I'm a coach. And they would be like, oh, I'm like, no, that's what you did with your life, girl. And you literally happened. It happened up until like a couple years ago, right? Where they just could not wrap their mind around it. And that's where we have to start, to your point, like getting into affirming and validating ourselves. Like, what feels right in my spirit? What gives me joy? What lights me up? Because if it's going to be based on me waiting for the reaction of someone else to be like, oh, that may not be the thing. You don't have to understand what I do. You don't have to understand why I do it. As long as I know that I'm doing what I feel called to do and I'm committed to that call for my life, and I actually see the benefit and the results that it produces for the people who do get it. I'm not here to convince everyone of what I do. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I think like being in the personal development industry, I always say it's a gift and a curse. I really say it's a pain but I won't curse for y'all. But because in order to be in this industry, the gift is you get to help people in a really intimate way. You get to know people, you get to create spaces for them to be real and vulnerable. And it is a gift that someone would trust you like that. But the curse, and I'm putting that in quotes, is that you also have to do your stuff, your internal stuff. Like you can't hide
all day, all the time.
And sometimes I'm like, do I have to deal with this belief today? And it's like, well, if you got this thing, and if you want to do this thing, you got to go to your tools. And it's just like, okay. And that part is the challenging part, but it also is the gateway to you really being your authentic self. And I think that's what everybody wants.
Yeah.
Just to be able to be themselves all the time.
What I love about what you do too is you're not trying to force everyone to become an entrepreneur.
No.
I cannot stand like job shaming, right? Like 9 to 5 shaming when people are like, oh, if you got a 9 to 5, you building. Listen, I believe that most financial mismanagement is caused by lack of fulfillment. There are
Mm-hmm.
definitely people who are entrepreneurs who are completely unfulfilled, as we
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm sure we've both
Mm-hmm.
seen, because they might have the right gift or skill set, but they're using it in the wrong place,
Mm-hmm.
or they're using it with the wrong people, and it's making them question the gift,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're miserable.
Right.
And they could be better off really taking their gifts and using it inside of an organization that appreciates it and can allow it to flourish, and maybe they can still have like an entrepreneurial mindset but also get their check. I'm
Right.
not like, we're not going to shame people for getting their check if it's in alignment with what they feel called to do.
Right. Right. And I think that those organizations and businesses, just like our business, are there to make the lives of people better. Like if this is the whole point of this whole existence game, is so that we can help each other and make each other's lives better. And if you're in an organization that is aligned with your purpose and you see that you could actually not only make the lives of the clients in that business better, but the lives of your fellow employees better by modeling how to have an entrepreneurial mindset in this position, by talking about what you see, by be willing to step up and say, like, this is an issue, and addressing, the mindset issues that come up at work, you're changing the lives of the people in that organization too. It doesn't matter where you do it, right? It's
But
just doing
that's
it.
really, what I want people to understand more than anything from the work that I do is that purpose doesn't require that you run your own business. So, whenever I talk about chase purpose, people automatically assume, well, let me quit my job. Yeah, they will tell you, anyone who's been through Purpose to Platform, folks come in talking about, my goal is to quit my job in 12 weeks. I'd be like, hey, 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 wait a minute.
Right.
Right. There's a lot that has to happen between, you starting this program today and you quitting your job. Like that's not what we're advocating for here. What I'm advocating for is that you embrace your God-given gifts. Like what I'm
Mm-hmm.
advocating for is that you stop looking to the left or the right and assuming that someone else's gifts are sexier than yours.
Mm-hmm.
And so because their gift is playing the piano, or I don't care if it's underwater basket weaving, you're like, "Oh, mine is just strategy." Ma'am, strategy
Mm-hmm.
is a big deal. If you can
Right.
look right, if you could look at someone's, else's business or project or whatever it is, and from a bird's eye view be able to connect the dots for them, that's a big deal. What do you mean? That's just what I do. That's nothing. And you can do that again in your business or in someone else's. The point is, how do you feel when you get to do it?
Right. And
And are you
mhm,
making a living doing it?
exactly. Because entrepreneurship has taught me so many lessons, but just like what you're saying, like if you aren't willing to deal with your stuff as you're doing it, it's going to be rough. It's going to be rough, right? Financially. And then that's when it's rough financially, that's when your just like fight or flight and your mechanisms to kind of make you feel safe go into overdrive. And so you have to spend so much of your time and attention trying to just calm your nervous system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you kind of have a plan and you start to put yourself in purposeful positions and think of yourself entrepreneurially, if I could get that word out, while at work, you can start to model some of the behaviors and practices that you want to have in your current role, right? Even before you move on to something else or whatever, in your current role, you can start to do it.
I love that you said purposeful positions,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that speaks to intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I talk about with this concept of chase purpose, not money, is that I've been very intentional about putting myself in purposeful positions. So, not the position that was going to give me the most money at that time, even though, Toya, let's be real, I was on my brother's couch. I needed the money. Like,
Mm-hmm.
be clear, I
Mm-hmm.
needed the money. But I also at the time just felt like if I take that, it's going to take me too far off the path of what I feel like I should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I took positions that paid less, but they taught me that I could monetize helping people with personal finance, because here I am at a nonprofit that's doing it, that's giving this type of education, creating this curriculum. I was out speaking all over the city, engaging people around this idea of how they could shift their mindset towards finances. And it was like, okay, this is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's folks exchanging money. They wasn't giving it to me, but baby, they was exchanging money somewhere. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, this is a thing. I can do this. And sometimes I think we're so afraid to take that step that leads to a more purposeful position, because in the right now, it doesn't feel profitable enough.
Right.
But baby, what I learned, what I was exposed to, the relationships that were built, just the awareness of what was possible, that served me so much more in the long run than had I taken that position that looked more profitable, but it wasn't in alignment with my purpose. And I guarantee you, I would have been miserable.
Yeah. I think to your point, that's probably where most lawyers are. I think it's an astronomical percentage. I believe it's like some 76% of lawyers are dissatisfied with their career. Right. That's it. There's an epidemic of depression, of substance abuse. There's all these things going on in the legal field that no one is talking about. And it's, to your point, people are sacrificing their purpose for profit and feeling like, okay, I made this 6 figures. If I take this job, I'm only going to be making X amount, even though it's aligned with my purpose and my future vision. Like, now I don't have X amount of dollars. And I think what we can learn, or what I hope we are learning as a culture, is that the resource that isn't renewable is our time. Right. And so we're only here for a very specific amount of time. And if you want to have a fulfilling life, a joyful life, then you want to go after that purpose. You will find ways to support yourself, and it will get easier, and more money will come. You have to trust that. You have to trust in that spirit, that the spirit isn't against you, it's for you. But you are going to have to learn new skills if you are transitioning into something new, right? And I think it's worth it. Why? I think there's a reason why so many people that you see, they'll spend 30 years in a career or whatever, and as soon as they retire, they're yes, they have a heart attack or something happens. You don't want that to be your life, right? You don't want to spend 30 years somewhere not living a life for most of some dollars that are going to be, let's be real, taken away in taxes anyway. Like, you can figure it out. You can figure it out.
Yeah.
You can figure it out.
I think for many people, Toya, though, you hit it earlier. It's the money. And yes, especially if you've fallen into all the trappings of what you should, quote unquote, look like when you're successful. So you have over leveraged yourself with a home and a certain car, and you feel like you have to keep up certain appearances in social media because insert high paying profession. I'm, supposedly high paying profession, right? So it's not just the money and possibly the debt that is tying you to it. It's also, like you said earlier, it's the ego. It's if I don't say I'm an attorney, who am I? If I don't say I'm a lawyer, who am I? And I remember my husband went through that transition. He was in entertainment and he was the manager for a really well-known entertainer. And when that season was up, although my husband was still doing well in what he chose to do next, when people be like, oh, how's it going on the TV set? I could see the seconds that would go by as he had to process and accept, like, okay, that's not my reality anymore. And it wasn't like, oh, he left one day and then the next day he had bounced back. No, I watched it for over a year where I could tell it would do a little something because his identity was in being this person's manager, and it was in doing the specific task, and it was getting in the jet and going all over the country or all over the world. And then when it was like, I'm still making really great money, but I'm at the house, he's like, well, that doesn't sound exciting. I'm like, but they excited at the bank. You worried about the wrong stuff. You worried about the wrong stuff. No, but it's that connection.
Mm-hmm.
It's that connection. And when we can release that,
Mm-hmm.
what was possible for you when you allowed yourself, to evolve into your next level of purpose, which is what you do today?
You know what? Just going back to that question, I was thinking that people ask, I was like, it would be great if we could evolve from an introductory question of like, what are you doing right now to like, who are you serving? Right? Wouldn't
Yes.
that be great? Like if that's the
And
first,
what lights you up right
and what
now?
lights you out right now instead of what
Hmm.
do you do? Right? I think that would change a lot. But to your question, what opened up for me is this business, right? So in this business, in the coaching business, and how I came to it is that when I was depressed, I didn't know, and I had to take time off. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen to me. Like, I don't know if I'm going to get a job. I took a sabbatical for that time. That was a big deal. I had had a job since I was 14, so I had never not worked. And it felt like my options were limited. And at the time, I was writing for a platform called Solo Practice University. And so I wrote a blog post like, I might not work no more, y'all. It might be over for me. And what happened with that is that I got so many lawyers contacting me who were struggling and who were like, thank you for writing that. Thank you for being honest. Can I talk to you? I'm going through this, I'm going through that. And after talking with them, I was like, these are just some great people, man. Like, they're just good people who have good hearts. And I can figure out not only how to help them, but how to help myself with what I was already interested in, which is personal development, creativity, being entrepreneurial. I was already interested in that stuff. And so what opened up for me in that is my purpose. And it's really to use like my coaching and my advocacy skills to help talented people fully own their lives and earn their worth, right? And by opening up that purpose, I've been able to meet so many people. I met you, I met Natalie, I met Twana. I've been able to create a life for myself that I can be proud of and that I'm happy about every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really love how you were able to, and I know it sounds cliche, but it's so true, you guys. Take a painful season in your life and make it purposeful,
Mm-hmm.
because let's be real, some people could not look for what that silver lining, if you will, could
Mm-hmm.
be, or just by putting out the blog post, I call that taking the next best step and just allowing the path to be opened, right? So
Mm-hmm.
one thing happens, it leads you to a new thought, and then the next thought. A lot of people are so paralyzed by their experience that they never see what's possible on the other side because they just sit in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, especially if you have, any mental health challenges, that it's not as easy to just like, oh, keep it push. I'm not saying keep it pushing by any means, but I do always feel like, um, with the proper support, there's an opportunity to try to fight to see a lesson, a blessing, a new path, a new possibility, even in the midst of what we're feeling or experiencing. So if we choose to see it as, well, this isn't happening to me, what if it's happening for me? And I just need to keep my eyes peeled for the possibility, then what could be ahead? What can lie ahead? And so kudos to you for
Thank
for using your experience to create such a wonderful platform. Toya, before I let you go, I have to ask you what we call here rapid wisdom questions at
Okay.
Redefining Wealth. So I'm going
Okay.
to ask you a few things and just tell us the first thing that comes to mind. I know you're a lawyer, but don't overthink it. I know deep down you're a lawyer.
I'll try. I'll try.
All right. How do you define success?
Oh, success is living in your purpose.
Come on, you better have it ready. Okay. How do you define wealth in 3 words or less?
Freedom, overflow, and fun.
Ooh, that overflow. I felt that in my spirit. I like that. Yes. Okay. What's one book that has helped you redefine wealth for yourself?
So one book that's helped me is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, which is a book on creativity. But the passage or I don't know if it was a chapter or passage where she speaks about not letting fear drive the car, but recognizing like fear is in the car. They in this ride with you for your life. It's never going away. And self-doubt, and they're all in there. All the band of brothers, they're all they're triplets, self-doubt, lack of confidence, they're in the car, but you don't have to let them drive it.
Right. And you can still make it to the destination with them.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Okay, this is the last one. Fill in the blank. My name is, and for me, the truth about wealth is.
My name is Toya Gavin, and the truth about wealth is that it's not about money, it's about what you do with your time.
Amen. I love that. Toya, thank you so much for being here. This has been such a great conversation. I hope you enjoyed your time too.
I did. It was a pleasure to talk with you and to be with you, really. It's a great conversation. This is why the personal development industry is the best.
Yes, it is. It is. Thank you so much. Today's Ask Patrice Anything comes from Chelsea in Baltimore, Maryland.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Chelsea. I have one simple question. What is the most practical way to chase purpose and not pay? If you could give an explanation of the most practical way, of a daily applicable way. Thank you. Have a good one.
Chelsea, that is such a great question. What does it mean to chase purpose practically in your everyday life? For me, chasing purpose means that as I go throughout my day, I am looking to make decisions rooted in faith, not fear. So what I have come to understand is a lot of times we make choices just because of the financial impact. We don't give any consideration to what feels right in our soul, what feels good in our spirit, what's in alignment for what we say we want or who we say we want to be or become. And so what does it look like practically when you are going throughout your day and you are faced with a choice? Do you feed in to the fear, to the queasiness, to the anxiousness, or do you take a step back and go, is this in purpose? Like, is this what I actually should be doing? That's everything. That's when you're making a decision about whether you should pay for peace and bring support into your life, or should you move across country, or should you take that job that doesn't necessarily, have the same benefits or the same title as the job you may have now or jobs you've had in the past, but it feels good in your soul. Chasing purpose means you literally are making decisions from a place of, what is the bigger picture here? Or are you just looking and only looking at dollars and cents? And if it makes financial sense and it sounds logical, I'm going to go in that direction. But oftentimes, that's not always the most purposeful thing to do. And it's not the thing that you should be doing in your spirit. And it can come again from making really small choices, even, do I get the lobster because I want to create an experience for my family this weekend? Or do I keep getting frozen chicken nuggets because that's what I see in my bank account right now? I've made a lot of decisions in my life over and over again that didn't seem logical in the moment, but they taught me about what to expect, about how to treat myself, about how to teach other people how to treat me, about what I was really being led to do in the marketplace. And chasing purpose looks like it's not always going to be logical. Some things you just have to follow your spirit. And I believe that when you follow your spirit, you are more in line with purpose than you'll ever be. So I hope that helps, Chelsea. Thank you so much for the question. All right, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed your time here with us at Redefining Wealth. Make sure you pop on over into our free Facebook community, the Redefining Wealth community with Patrice Washington. Would love to have you. Let's talk about this episode. What were your takeaways? Also, feel free to tag me in social media, Seek Wisdom PCW. Let me know if this episode resonated with you. All right? Until next time, I want you to go live your life's purpose, find fulfillment, and earn more without ever chasing money. Talk to you later.